during my federal career, I'd have like conversations with people down the hall or at some meeting or just random conversations. I'm like, whoa, they have no idea how their pension works. It's like walking into a casino and putting a whole bunch of money down on a table and you don't know any of the rules or like how the game works.
If you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you smash that like button and click subscribe. For those of you listening on a podcast platform, be sure to subscribe on whatever platform that is and leave us a rating if you can. The more likes, ratings, and subscriptions that we get, the more we can spread the message and grow our community. So we also have a free Facebook group. It's called the Average Joe Finances Network. Check us out, join the group, join the community, ask questions, and become a part of the team. All of our other social media accounts are listed in our flow page, and we have them in the video or podcast description below. Welcome back to the Average Joe Finances podcast. I'm your host, Mike Cavaggioni. Let's get to today's episode. Hey, how's it going, everybody? So today's guest is Sam Zelinka, and Sam has been a federal employee since the age of 18. He currently runs an early retirement blog called governmentworkerfi.com to help federal employees understand their benefits and plan for early retirement. Sam, we've been talking a lot on social media via Twitter. I'm really excited to have you on the show. Thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I'm really excited to be here. And I just want to say that I am a government employee, but I'm speaking in my personal capacity today. So nothing I say represents the views of USDA, and this is just me speaking as myself.
We're just talking to Sam today, guys. So yeah, got to get that disclaimer out of the way and make sure, that we know who we're talking to, and it's not any representation of the government or anything like that. So thank you for that. And I'm really excited to have you on. So I kind of just did a little wave top touch of your background. Like we talked, basically you've been a federal employee since the age of 18. And you run this retirement blog, right, called governmentworkerfi.com. And I'd like to talk a little bit about all of that. But if you could, can you just share a little bit about your story? How did this all get started for you? What made you decide to go into the federal government workspace and then decide to blog about what you're doing to retire?
Yeah. So maybe I'll start with the blog and then go back to the federal retirement thing. So, I've always been really interested in personal finance and investing. And that was something we talk about at the dinner table when I was growing up. And I started my federal career pretty early. So, what do I know about federal retirement? Well, not a whole lot. So I started reading about how the pension works and all that stuff. And I was like, wow, this is really cool. And I think just during my federal career, I'd have conversations with people down the hall or at some meeting or just random conversations. I'm like, whoa, they have no idea how their pension works. And this is kind of scary or kind of shocking to me because wow, it's like walking into a casino and putting a whole bunch of money down on a table and you don't know any of the rules or how the game works. So I was always kind of shocked by that. When I got interested in the FIRE movement, I started reading a lot of other FIRE blogs, and I was like, well, these blogs are great and I like them, but they don't really address any of the aspects you'd have in terms of federal employment and how does that affect your pension or other benefits. And so I just felt like there was kind of a need there. It was a topic that I knew a lot about, I cared about. And then I also really just want to help other federal employees because it is super important. And I think there's just a lot of misinformation out there. I mean, OPM has all the information out there, but you have to read it and interpret it. And it's really hard to understand what's going on. So yeah, I just wanted to have stuff that's easy to read. If you're a federal employee, hey, you can read this. And it's there to help them. So that's kind of the story with the blog.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you're hitting some pretty important topics right off the bat, because one of the things that we talk about here on Average Joe Finances, and just in general, how there is a lack of financial literacy, or a lack of knowledge for people that are working in these different 9-to-5 jobs, whether it's federal employment or not. They don't really know what to do with their money to set themselves up for future retirement. And everybody thinks that hey, I'll just save and invest in my 401k and then retire at 65 or 70 and, collect Social Security. And then that's going to be it. There's so much more to that. And there's so much more that you can do. So you found this particular niche, right, in the federal employee space. And you found that there's a need for it because as you talk to fellow employees, you're seeing that, there's a lack of knowledge. There's some disparity here. Even though all the resources are there and available to them, you had mentioned OPM, right? So for those of you listening, OPM is the Office of Personnel Management. And I know that because I'm also a federal employee myself. So, but the thing is when you go to websites like that and you're trying to digest this information, it's not an easy pill to swallow, or it's not easily digestible, right? It's just like this wall of text. And people are going to look at that and just run away screaming, like with their hair on fire and hands up screaming. But what you do is you provide this blog, right? That, provides a lot of this same knowledge, but it's just easier to digest. It's a greater value because somebody will actually sit down and take the time to say, hey, this is easier to read. This is easier on my eyes. And I'm learning something here. So you found this way to provide a service to people in the same, kind of in the same shoes as you. And that, I think that's just absolutely amazing. So I know I'm kind of really dipping down into the weeds here, but that's kind of what this is all about, right? Is providing that financial literacy to others because you've discovered what you needed to do to get yourself to a point where you can retire early. And now you're saying, hey, you can do it too. And so I just want to say thank you that, for the service that you provide by having a blog like that provides such great information. So that's fantastic.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Yeah, I just wanted to jump in there and maybe expand a little bit. Sure, OPM, the government website with all these rules about federal retirement. But if you do a Google search, it's not going to take you to a logical spot on the OPM website. And it's so complicated because there might be one rule if you retire with 30 years of service and another if you retire with 10 years of service, and they're on completely different web pages. And if you don't know to look there, you're going to read one thing. And then that's why you hear these conversations in the hallway and you're like, no, you get to keep your health insurance. And it's like, no, you don't. You lose your health insurance. They're both right in very specific cases, but it's just all over the place. So a lot of what I try and do is if you, instead of writing it in the handbook, legal thing spread out with different subchapters based on the legal authority, I just if you have a question, you Google it, you hit my website, it's going to walk you through logically what you're going to find and kind of walk you through those steps in a way that's designed for humans and not lawyers. So that's a big part of what I do in terms of this really specific niche is just trying to help federal employees.
Yeah. You don't need a translator.
Oh yeah. So yeah, that's just that's a big part of what Government Worker Fi is for these people, providing them really good information that's solid. I'm not trying to lie to them or come up with stuff. It's all good information, but it's compiled in a way that designed for the user instead of for the government.
Right. It's something that has the end user in mind. So yeah, that's awesome. So, all right, Sam. So, you started as a federal employee at the age of 18. When was it that you took a look at your career, where you were going and said, I really need to make sure I'm setting myself up to be in a good spot when I decide I want to retire? When in your career was that, and what was that turning point? What flipped that switch?
Yeah. So I think it was probably when I was 22. It was kind of, right when I was finishing up my undergraduate. I had applied for a program. It doesn't exist anymore, but they needed scientists in certain areas that they didn't have a lot of scientists. So they'd pay for you to go to graduate school while you did research with the government. And so I got accepted in that program. I was starting graduate school, and that was when I became a permanent employee. I was just kind of a temporary employee before that. had some different temporary jobs. And so I was like, okay, well, this is like what it is. And so I spent a lot of time at first studying like how scientists get paid in the federal government, because they're on a special pay scale that has a lot of rules that you need to figure that out. And I think that was really huge for me, because I read this whole big document, and it turns out scientists in government, their pay is determined by a lot of things. But one of the things is like by how many publications you have and some other factors. So I was like honed in when I started graduate school is like, oh, I have the answers to the test. Like at the end of this, like I know I need to have a lot of publications. So like I'm going to try and publish as much as I can and do these other things that get researchers promoted so I can like climb up in pay as quickly as possible. So it kind of started there on my career track, figuring that out. And then while I was doing that, I was also trying to understand what the pension's like. So it's called FERS, stands for Federal Employee Retirement System. So like, okay, what's FERS? How does that work? What are some of these details with it? What's the thrift savings plan? How does that work? I had time because I was like young and I was in this career and I knew I was going to be in there for a long time because I had to pay back some time. The time I went to grad school, I had to pay that back in that job. And so, I took the time, I learned it. Yeah, the federal government's the largest employer in the United States. So I think these things are broadly applicable to a lot of people, but a very few percentage of this large employer really understand how it all works and how they can maximize it and how they can make sure they're getting what they earned. It's not taking anything away. It's just making sure they're getting what they earned. So
right on. Yeah. So there's a couple things you talked about in that, right? And you had mentioned as you're going through, you decided, okay, I need to figure out this pay scale and figure out how to move up in that pay scale as quickly as possible. But now then you talked about the actual FERS system, right? FERS and then Thrift Savings Plan, TSP. So can you explain like what the difference between the two of those are? Because some people think that for federal employees that all they get is a TSP and that there's a matching, that you get from your employer, the government. And then that's pretty much it. But there's a lot more that goes into that. So can you go into a little bit more detail about the difference between FERS and TSP?
Oh yeah. Like I could talk about that all day. So TSP, that's a little bit kind of more defined. That stands for Thrift Savings Plan. It works essentially the same as a 401k, but it's only available to civilian and military federal employees. And it only has 5 different funds in there that match certain benchmarks. So there's like a C fund, that's the S&P 500. There's a small cap fund, international fund, and 2 different types of bond funds. So it's really set up for federal employees and military members to be able to invest with it's set up so that they can't mess it up. As long as you're putting money in, it's going to grow, and it's going to do just fine in these general categories. It's got super low fees. And for civilian federal employees, if you put in 5%, they'll match 5%. And has the same maximum limit as a 401k. So $19,500 a year. And there's also a Roth option. So that's the TSP, just kind of the government's 401k and how those kind of FERS is the retirement system. So when most people think of FERS, they think about their pension, which is 1% of your salary, your high 3 salary. So like the last 3 years you work for the federal government, that average times 1% times the number of years of service. So if you work for 30 years, you get 30% of your final salary, roughly. But it's actually a lot more than that. If you're a FERS employee and you pass away before you retire, your spouse and children receives your FERS benefit, your pension benefit. There's a disability retirement that you can earn as well. There's the ability to carry your health insurance into retirement in certain situations. There's a FERS supplement that supplements the amount of your pension until you reach Social Security age. So there's billion different components to it, and it's actually really valuable. So on one of my blog posts, I kind of did this calculation about what happens if you retire like one day before your like minimum retirement age set by the government. And I calculated you lose about $1 million. Your pension, that like 1% per year times years of service, that's solid. Like you'd still earn that, but like you lose the health insurance, you lose the first supplement, you lose all these other things. And that was like a really big amount of money. So that's I just wanted to say that, like, oh yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So with that, so you're talking about like if you retire like a day before the minimum age that the government says you can retire. So you can retire and start collecting your FERS pension before that minimum date, but then you wind up losing other benefits. Is that what you're saying?
You can, anytime you walk away from the government, if you've, I take that back. If you've worked for the government for 5 years, you can get pension at age 62 equal to that formula. So if you work for 5 years and quit when you're 62, you get 5% of your high 3 salary. If you work for 10 years, you get 10% at age 62. So say you work for 30 years and the minimum retirement age for most people is 57. So say you work for 30 years, you start at 27 and you retire the day before your 57th birthday. You'd still get 30% of your salary, but you couldn't collect it until age 62. Whereas if you make it to 57, you can get it like on your 57th birthday. Like
right away.
And there's a whole bunch of other things that kick in if you work to minimum retirement age. So there's a lot going on with that.
Okay. Yeah. So similar to like the military retirement, right? So like I'm going to retire next year with 20 years in the Navy. And, you know, I start getting my pension right away. Whereas if I was to get out of the military and like, I guess, affiliate with the reserves later on and finish up my time in the reserves, I wouldn't actually get my military pension until I think 62 or is it 67? I don't remember the number off the top of my head because I'm not a reservist.
Right.
But yeah, so it kind of sounds like that. Like you do like a small amount of time, but you don't have to do any type of affiliation on the outside after that, right then. So if you just do the 5 years or the 10 years, no matter what, at 62, you're going to get some type of check, you know, based off of that high 3 salary, right?
Yeah. You're going to get a check for, the percentage, and you will know what it is because you know, your high 3 will be set.
Years of service. Yeah.
Yeah. I think the only thing to consider is that there's going to be inflation between that time. So, you know, if your salary is $100,000, you know, today, and then you wait 30 years to start collecting that, you know, maybe $100,000 is only like worth $50,000 in the future. And so, you know, what you're getting back is going to be smaller than it would be in today's dollars.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair. All right. So we're talking about, you know, different pensions and things like that, but I want to kind of switch focus a little bit. And I want to talk about your own personal financial journey. So what Sam is doing here. And from what I understand, I know you're married with kids, right? And you were able to pay off your house, I believe, in 10 years.
That's correct. Yeah.
And so you did that. And you're right now you're tracking to be financially independent in your early 40s. So if you could, can you tell us like what route you took and what you did to pay off your house early and to get yourself at a point where you're going to be able to be financially independent in your early 40s?
Yeah. So I think, I know you have a lot of stuff on the podcast about real estate and that kind of stuff, but my family like grew up and we're always talking about stocks and the stock market. Just like you said, there's a lot of different ways, a lot of different pathways to get where you're trying to go. So
absolutely.
That was kind of like what I was most comfortable with. That was what we were growing up. So, you know, I got my first job at 15, 16, something like that. And my dad helped me like open a Roth IRA, and start contributing to that as a teenager. So, and I mean, I think, you know, that compounds and compounds and compounds. And just trying to, so early on, you know, my 20s, college, that kind of stuff, like I didn't have a lot of money, but, you know, I tried to save some, put some in stocks. And then, I got married when we were kind of young. We were both in our early 20s, my wife and I, and we didn't really have a whole lot. I was going to graduate school. She got her first job. But we didn't really save a whole lot in the beginning, but then we also, every time we got a raise from that point on, and we got a lot of raises because we like just started working or like get out of school or something like that. We just try and save we tried to keep our expenses the same when we got these raises. And I think that was a big chunk of it because we were living just fine.
So
and
did you find that hard to do with inflation? Like, especially now, like it's pretty crazy, but back when inflation was the normal, quote unquote normal, like 2.5%, 3%, by doing that, by, taking all your pay raises and still trying to live off of, like, I guess your prior paychecks, what kind of impact did that have with inflation?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we weren't tracking things like super closely. Like since I started, a few years before I started blogging, like we started tracking like every penny and, getting expense reports every month. And now I could probably tell you exactly how much, how much inflation has affected our spending. But I don't know. I mean, maybe we raised it here or there a little bit, but I think most of the time we just saved it all. And then if things were really tight, we would like dial it back a little bit or adjust things. I mean, it's a fluid process.
I asked that because like I've read a couple other different like fire blogs, and one of the things that a big topic that always gets discussed is, okay, anytime you get a pay raise or anything like that, try to continue to live off of, what you were making before and invest the rest. And I think that works to an extent, but then I feel like after a couple of years, if you're still trying to live on like 5 years ago's salary, that you're going to start to really feel the effects of that. And it might take, in today's environment, it might even take 1 or 2 years where you get a pay raise and you realize, oh no, we gotta use some of this. So I was just curious, like, if you saw like some type of impact, as the years went on.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure, the answer is we did increase spending at various points, but, I think, the way we handled our finances was that we tried to put as little amount into joint checking as possible each month, like enough to cover our bills. And there was some like slop in there that we kind of knew what it was. And when it kind of got below that level, then we're like, oh, well, do we need to like tighten things up a little bit? And then if there was a few months where things were tight, we're like, okay, we're going to adjust this and put more into joint checking each month. So it was kind of like a lazy man's version of like zero-based budgeting or like a Dave Ramsey like envelope system or something. But it was kind of just, we know it's going into joint checking. We know how much is in there at various times a month. And if it gets too low, like, okay, we need to adjust this. And then if we found that, after several months, there's a lot in joint checking, we're like, well, we need to tighten this back down. So it was a fluid process.
Right. Yeah. So did you find, have you ever tried any of those methods, like the envelope method or anything like that?
We have not. We just had a system that worked. And my wife and I, we call them finance summits, but say like every 6 months or so, we'd sit down, look at our investment balances, look at our paychecks, how they were getting like distributed among like different investment goals and stuff, and then decide if we wanted to change anything. And it is kind of what worked for us. It was our system that we worked for us, but it wasn't, It didn't really draw strongly from say any of the big names that you would think.
Yeah. I'm just curious. Cause like, I know my wife and I, we tried the envelope system for a little while, which was great. I just, when you have physical cash and you're spending money as physical cash, you definitely are more apprehensive to hand over those dollars versus swiping a card. So it does help with that like disciplinary part of it. But it kind of evolved for us to where now we do sinking funds. So we have funds for every possible like different expense that we have. Like we have a pet and vet fund. Right.
Oh, we have that too.
Yeah. And then like car maintenance. We have a holidays and birthday fund. We know exactly how much we're going to spend on each person. It's kind of sick, but and we set it up that way. And then we have our allotment every month where, okay, when we get paid, okay, we move this here, this here, this here, this much goes into our investments, this much stays in the checking account to pay the bills, done. And we kind of broke it down that way. So we moved away from the envelope system, but basically, digitized it with the sinking funds method. And I'm just throwing that out there because I'm a big fan of that. So when you mentioned the envelope method, I was like, oh, okay. Kind of just rang that in my head.
Yeah. I mean, we were really similar. We had, I don't know, like a dozen savings accounts or something in addition to joint checking, plus our investments and that kind of stuff. So we had a car fund, we had a vacation fund, we had a pet fund, all that stuff. So that way when we were putting very little in joint checking, but, and that was stuff that wasn't tracked, like groceries and I don't know, whatever other stuff that on the mortgage and the stuff that needed to get paid. And then, if there was a car, something went wrong with the car, then that came out of the car fund. I think it would be hard to really just do this everything, the minimum amount's going into joint checking if you didn't have sinking funds, because a lot of things only come up, once a year or something like that. And that would just be way too complicated.
Yep. Right on. So, okay. I want to rewind back a little bit because I'm just looking down at my notes here, and there's something that you said, and I wrote it down because I find it really awesome that you guys had conversations at the dinner table when you were a kid on finances, right? You guys talked about money at the dinner table. Like for me growing up, that was always like a taboo topic. And a lot of people that I talk to, especially millennials and stuff, they always say that too. Like, oh yeah, like we never talked about money. We never talk about bills and things like that. That was always a very touchy subject. And then I've interviewed people on the podcast, especially people that immigrated to the United States. And they always said no, money was always a topic that we talked about. And they're very successful and did quite well for themselves. So do you think that having these conversations at the dinner table by everybody being comfortable to talk about that instilled some type of, I guess, just in the back of your mind, subconsciously just did something for your mentality to make you think about money in a different way than I guess somebody who wouldn't talk about that at the dinner table? Yeah.
I mean, I think it was huge. I mean, I think definitely in terms of confidence in investing in stocks, or, I mean, I'll, have conversations with people and they're like, oh man, I've got everything in their G fund because the G fund, for those listeners who aren't government employees, is it's a guaranteed fund in the TSP. Like I said, there's 5 funds. The G fund is like a money market or savings account, guaranteed. So yeah, I mean, I'll have conversations.
It doesn't have a great return at all.
Yeah. It's lower than inflation. Yeah.
Before I knew what I was doing, I spent 13 years in the G fund while I was in the Navy. It was, I kick myself in the face all the time for that. But right.
So I guess, I mean, there's tangible things okay, I started off and I was like, okay, well, I'm going to have all my money in the C fund because I'm not going to retire for, 40 years or whatever. And that's going to be stock fund for your listeners. Sorry, using the government terminology, but so I think there were things like that, but also just, I never felt like money was a taboo topic. And I knew, when I was thinking about going to college and that kind of stuff, I had a very clear picture about what college was going to be like, the cost of college. And we had a lot of conversations about different people we knew in the neighborhood or whatever. And their kids' college and their student loans and other stuff. And I was like, wow, yeah, okay. Or this is the value of a college degree. This is how much it's going to cost if I go here, all those things. And this is, I mean, I just felt like I didn't realize it at the time because it was just normal. Hey, we're going to talk about this. We talk about stocks or we talk about college costs or that kind of stuff. But now learning that's kind of unusual in America is okay, yeah, I'm really glad I had that knowledge when I was a kid.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe it was just the household I grew up in, but other people I talked to would always say, oh yeah, no, we never really talked about money. It was always a very touchy subject. And I always found that odd. And I remember too, even as I got older, and I became more, savvy with my finances, having conversations, even with my dad about hey, I think you should check out, doing maybe something a little bit different. Oh, but what are you going to talk to me about that stuff for? He's like, I know what I'm doing, and then, but it's Yeah, it was just never really a topic that my family liked to discuss at all. Was money. So I try to with my own children, just keep them in the know and just educated in finances. I'm not afraid to show them like what our budget looks like and what we spend on certain things. I think it's important for them to know that, so they understand the value of the dollar. And on top of that, the other thing is financial education itself. I'm thankful that my wife and I, like, we homeschool our kids, so financial literacy is part of their curriculum. So it's just something that I think is super important, because I am at the point where it's like, I want to build generational wealth for my family for generations to come. But at the same time, I want my family to, like, my children to be able to go out and do this on their own. I want to give them all the tools and put that in their toolbox. So speaking of tools in the toolbox, right? So we're going to kind of bring this back into being a federal employee, right? So besides FERS and TSP, which are some fantastic retirement benefits, what are some other benefits to being a federal employee?
Yeah. I think the one I enjoy the most is annual leave. So we get an incredibly generous amount of vacation. So after you've been with the government for 15 years, you get 8 hours of pay period. So that's like 10% of, I kind of consider it like I only work 90% of the time, because every 80 hours I work, I get 8 hours off. So that's a really good one. The government health insurance is pretty good. It's better than a lot of the private sector plans. It's not the world's most generous health insurance, but it's very solid health insurance. And if you work until your minimum retirement age, you can take it with you into retirement, which is like pretty unheard of. Besides the military, like there's nowhere else that you can just take your healthcare with you when you go. So that's huge. I think those are the big ones. Probably I'm spacing on a couple because I wasn't really thinking about that. I have a whole post on my blog where I talk about all these random benefits of working for the federal government, but those are the two that pop into my head right now.
Awesome. Yeah. And those are two great benefits. And honestly, the ones I figured you would actually touch on too. So that's one of the things I enjoy about, being in the military as well is the annual leave, and then the medical benefits that I too will get to carry into my retirement, which is huge, especially with the cost of healthcare, in the United States. It's pretty astronomical. And if you don't have, good health insurance or coverage, you can find yourself, not saving for retirement, but saving for hospital bills for the rest of your life. So it could be pretty daunting when you think of it that way. So, all right. So besides what you're doing with FERS and TSP with your investments for your future retirement, what are some other things that you yourself invest in?
Yeah. So a lot of stocks, a lot of index funds, a few individual stocks, and those are spread across Roth IRAs and taxable investment accounts. And then, a small percent in cryptocurrencies. And I kind of look at those as like pretty volatile, and like, I don't know what's going to happen with them, but,
you're not putting money that like you're afraid to lose in there.
Yeah. It's like, if it disappears, it disappears. But if it,
if it goes to the moon,
if it goes to the moon, yeah. So like I just kept seeing on Reddit, like everywhere on Reddit, like this January was like talking about Dogecoin. And I was like, what? Like, no. And then I was like, I don't even remember where on Reddit I saw it, but I was like, okay, if somebody over here is talking about Dogecoin, like I just need to buy some. And, like it went up, I thought about it as just like putting a bet on like a sporting event or something like that. Yeah. And, it did like, I don't know, like a 8-team parlay or something better type performance. And I was like, oh man, I should have had a bigger thing. So then after that, it kind of made me realize that people are going to put money into cryptocurrencies, and I don't know if they're going to have any value. Like if you go on Reddit and read like the cryptocurrency Reddits, they're all like, oh, this like coin is super valuable because it's going to do smart contracts, or it's going to do this, or it's going to do that. And I'm like, I don't know if it's going to do any of that, but if people are like willing to pay more money in the future for it, or if it does get adopted, or if it does, then it's going to go up a lot. And so like, yeah, it's kind of fun money, but it's also, I mean, I don't think it has any value. Like a stock is like partial ownership in a company, and it's going to have some value and it's going to pay you some dividends. Like buying a cryptocurrency is like buying a kind of crazy collectible thing. But if enough people buy them and say they're going to buy them, and then it could really take off, and I wouldn't want to like not have anything in it. So that's kind of my thoughts on cryptocurrencies. Yeah, I wrote a really funny post on Dogecoin on my blog that like got shared a ton, and like Google was recommending it to people. I'm like, they're like, cool. You might be interested in. So yeah, I felt like I need to get a Dogecoin tattoo after that, because it was like my blogs brand for a while.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I don't mess with too many cryptocurrencies. I have in the past, but now there's only one that I have. And the only reason why I have it, it's because it's actually related to the podcast, because the podcast, I have it up on this site called Aureal, Aureal. And basically, based on like listens, people can vote for your podcast or leave a tip and stuff like that. And then you get these things called Hive coins. So I have a whole bunch of Hive coins because for whatever reason, the podcast did surprisingly well on there. So I have all these Hive coins sitting in this wallet, and I don't know what to do with it. And it has a monetary value. Like I can cash it out, I guess. I don't know. But that's like the only one I have. And that's like the only crypto wallet I really have. It's interesting though. I mean, I had a guest on not too long ago. That episode hasn't aired yet either, but we kind of like dove a little bit deeper into crypto, and he was helping me learn a little bit about it. He kind of explained blockchain a little bit better, because it wasn't something I really knew too much about, or like really cared to get too like involved in, because I just didn't see it really. But after talking with him and understanding more about why there's like this crypto craze, it was a little easier for me to digest and understand it a little bit better. But it's still not something that I'm 100% sold on or would like really invest in. Like I'll have that small percentage that I have right now, and it's I didn't even put any money into it myself. So I'll just kind of leave it there, let it sit. And if it goes up in value, then fantastic. If it doesn't do anything, well, I didn't lose anything. So I'm good with that.
Yeah. I think that's a good strategy to have. And I mean, but I'm also kind of just a big believer in like, people are adults, and if they want to like put it all on like, whatever, Cardano or like Bitcoin or something, like go for it. But I think for me, it's a small percentage, but I think like we really don't know, like it's really young. So it could either like boom or bust, and we just have no idea. But
yeah, I mean, time will tell, right? We'll see what happens. Who knows? 20 years from now, you'll probably be like, you know what, Mike? Oh man, I should have bought more crypto. Dang it, Or hey, I should have bought less, or not got into it at all. I mean, we'll see what happens. That's the other thing too. Is like it's still too young to think about like what the potential could really be. There's not enough like, I guess, data to really make like have some type of analytical thought process as to where crypto can be going. As some people can sit here and say all day that it's going to, it's all going to skyrocket. But I mean, we'll see. We'll see what the future holds. I don't want to go down this crypto rabbit hole. I go down rabbit holes all the time, but this is one I want to try to avoid. So gonna move on from there. But okay. So let's say that we have somebody that is, a new federal employee. They, age of 18, or maybe they went to school and, they're in their early 20s, and they're starting off, in civil service, and they say, hey, okay, I know that I want to retire by 45. What would you recommend to somebody who's starting government service? Let's say at 20 years old. So we'll give them a 25-year period. What would you recommend to somebody to do if they wanted to retire at 45?
Yeah, I mean, I think the advice there is probably going to be really similar to somebody that is not in government service, right? So you're going to need to have a cash flow plan for how you're going to cover your expenses, say after 45. Their situation is going to be a little bit better because at age 62, they're going to get their deferred pension, which is going to be like 25% of their final salary. So that's going to help out kind of towards the end. So that's good because if they, burn through their money a little bit faster than normal, they'd have that safety plan. They're still going to have to figure out health insurance and some of these other things. But
oh, that's right. Because if you stop before 57, you lose that.
If you stop before 57, you lose that. So it's like a huge...
That's definitely something to consider.
Yeah, it's definitely something to consider. And they do have, it seems like every few years in my office and other offices, it's different, but they offer a thing called a early out buyout. So there, if you have 20 years of service and are age 50 or 25 years at any age, you can retire early with full benefits, health insurance, immediate pension, and all that stuff. So, if they've got 25 years of service, maybe like you'd want to stick around a little bit and see if it seems like there's going to be a like buyout situation or early out for them. I don't know. I mean, yeah, each situation is going to be a little bit different, but I think, if you're just starting off and you're early in the game in a federal career and you want to retire early, then it's just a matter of knowing what your federal retirement is going to look like after early retirement.
Yeah. So plan for what that cost is going to look like between the age of 45 and 62 and have a good plan for that. That includes health insurance. Now,
right.
When they start collecting their pension at 62, do they get the health insurance back or is that it's just gone?
It's gone.
Wow. Okay. That's good to know. So it's not like, you get back on and you're back where everybody else is at once you hit 62. You're getting the pension, but that's it. Excuse me. So, okay. No, that's definitely good to know.
I've seen some stuff on like federal employee message boards where it's like somebody's plan to like apply for federal jobs again when they're close to their minimum retirement age. And then, cross your minimum retirement age and then retire again.
Okay. So you pretty much end at 25 years of service and then, hey, at 55, I'm going to go work for 2 more years or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, that's the plan. I don't know how the federal government is an equal opportunity employer, and we do hire people in their 50s. Like I've seen that frequently if they're qualified. And if you leave federal service, you can get reinstatement rights, which makes it a little bit easier to come back. So, and it just needs to be any federal job to get your health insurance back at age 57. So it doesn't seem completely crazy. There is some risk in that. It's not something
if you can't get rehired. That would be so don't plan on it that way. Don't bank on it. But now let's say somebody was like at a much higher pay grade, like they're like a GS 15 or whatever, right? Like and they retire at 25 years and then they come back in at the age of 55 as like a GS 9. Is their high 3 going to be based off their GS 15 salary or is it going to be based off of their most recent 3 years?
No, it's the highest 3.
Okay, perfect. Yeah.
It's still
similar to the military.
Yeah. And I guess that's kind of a steal because they're getting the like GS 15 salary year, like multiplier.
Yeah. Working
these extra years as, a GS 9 or, park ranger, or, something. So, okay. I think that's where if you want to retire early, like, and not work at all, then there's not a lot of options for you as a federal employee. But if you say like, well, you could look for a part-time job or you could look for, some seasonal jobs.
Like a seasonal federal job?
Yeah, there's seasonal federal jobs. Like, okay. They're called like 1313s. For some reason, like 13 pay periods on, 13 pay periods off, I think is that. So a lot of those are with like the Forest Service or Bureau of Land Management, where you have some like national park or something that's open for
like different seasons and things like
different seasons.
Yeah. That's very interesting.
Firefighters are another one. But that one's, kind of hard to get into if you're an older person.
Right.
But those are all seasonal employees as well. And there's a lot of firefighters. There's a lot of wildfires in the United States. It's a kind of tough thing right now.
That's good to know. So I already asked you like one of the questions I normally ask near the end about what recommendations you would have for somebody coming into this. But there was something that I didn't get to ask you about that I wanted to ask you about, and I have to ask you about this before we end this interview. And that is, we briefly mentioned it, but you paid off your house in 10 years. How'd you do that?
Yeah. So I think that's one of these things that it was a big motivation for us. I know that we could have made more money if we invested the money that we paid down our mortgage balance with. It wasn't it wasn't financially advantageous to pay off the mortgage first, but it encouraged us to save more money because we could see the balance shrink. And so there was kind of a couple of things that happened when we got the mortgage. I don't know, now in 2021, interest rates are super duper low, but I don't know, 5 years ago, they dropped to some insanely low level that was the lowest ever. And so we refinanced after we had owned the house for 5 years to a 10-year mortgage.
Oh, wow.
And it increased our payments a little bit. Well, a moderate amount, but it cut the term down to 10 years. And then once you are on a 10-year mortgage, the amount you pay in principal is way, way more than the amount you're paying in interest. So that way, even if we didn't put another penny towards the principal, it was going to be gone. It was going down pretty fast.
Oh, that's amazing.
So that was the big lift. But then I think it was something where if we got a refund or a check or just any random pieces of money from anything, sold some stuff on Facebook Marketplace, we just log into the bank and make a mortgage principal payment that day. Oh, hey, we just sold some stuff that we're not using. Let's go transfer $25 to the mortgage principal.
$25, hey, it's something. It's just chipping it down. So
yeah. So you do enough of those $25 payments and it
adds up to a mortgage payment.
Yeah. It adds up to a mortgage payment, and put some of the tax return in there, put some, whatever in there. And that was how we did it. And it was, like I said, it was real motivational to see that go down. If we were throwing the money in our investment account, taxable investment account, well, it's going up. And these are big numbers. So it doesn't, $25 doesn't really seem like a big deal. But if you're know that it's cutting off, eventually cuts off another month. I had a spreadsheet where I was kind of tracking it. So I can say oh yeah, well, next month, it's going to be that much lower. So
no, that's great. So was that more of because you said it was kind of a motivational thing as you were paying down the balance of your mortgage, was that because you already mentioned it too, you could have been investing that money, into your investment accounts and it, give you a better return than paying down the mortgage early. But was it more of a mental thing? Hey, we're going to have our house paid and no mortgage payment. Was that kind of the reasoning behind it? Just that comfort level? Yeah,
I think it was comfort, and it was, and then it was well, we own our house and okay, well, if things hit the fan, we own the house and we can live for a lot less. And that just really, it was a great peace of mind once we reached that goal and kind of working towards it. We could see that we could live on one income if we needed to, or we could do all these other things. And so it just felt like a lot of freedom, and that's something we don't need to worry about. And our kids don't need to worry about where we're going to live, or it's a lot of peace of mind.
Yeah. Cost of living is a lot better when there is no housing cost.
Right.
So that's awesome. Well, okay. Sam, this has been absolutely amazing. Your journey, just in itself and what you share on your blog is just some fantastic information, not only for federal employees and government workers, but just in general for somebody that's looking for some type of financial knowledge to invest, get themselves set up to where they can retire early, pay off their house early. Just so many different benefits to checking out a blog like yours. So it's not just limited to, federal employees. So if you could, we've already mentioned it a couple of times, but if you could you share where people can find more information about you, your website, any social media profiles that they can follow and things like that?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I had a really great time talking with you as well. It was a lot of fun. I love talking about this kind of stuff. So yeah, if people want to find me, my website is Government Worker Fi. So that's governmentworkerfi.com. My Twitter handle is just GovWorkerFi, and I'm pretty active on there. And there's a Government Worker Fi Facebook account, profile, page, all that stuff as well. So that's where I am mostly. So people can find me there. And yeah, just tweet at me or send me a DM and be happy to connect.
Awesome. And that's how Sam and I got connected. It's pretty awesome. Again, absolute pleasure having you on. We'll make sure we have all of those links in the show notes. For those of you that are listening, if you're driving right now, don't sit here and try to write that down or visit the website. Wait till you're in a safe place. But it'll be in the show notes there waiting for you. Make it easy for everybody to find your stuff. And again, Sam, thank you so much for taking some time to talk with me today.
Hey, thank you, Mike. It was great. My pleasure.
All right, we're out of here. Thank you for making it to the end of this episode. Greatly appreciate you being here with me today on the Average Joe Finances podcast. If you haven't done so yet, make this the episode that you go leave us a 5-star rating or subscribe to our YouTube channel. The Average Joe Finances podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only. Have an outstanding day.